Hey, and welcome to the PublishPress podcast. I'm Steve from PublishPress and Dan
Knauss from Multidots.
So, Dan, who are we talking with today?
Today it's Matt Medeiros from his Omni-Channel empire. Too many properties and channels to name, but WP Minute and many others that he's well known for in the WordPress space.
Yeah, we invited Matt on to talk about WP Minute, and then he started talking about his other projects. And wow, we've put as many as we can in the show notes, but Matt is really a personality who's almost everywhere in the WordPress space. And this was a really interesting conversation about how Matt got to this point, being a WordPress journalist, and what he's pushing into next, including focusing on other CMSs and also AI. Hey, Matt, welcome to the PublishPress podcast.
Steve, Dan, it's a pleasure.
This is not your first rodeo, not your first podcast, right?
That is correct.
I mean, you're probably one of the most prolific podcasters in the WordPress space. You have a WP Minute podcast. You have a Gravity Formers podcast. You're the guest on at least one other podcast a week. Am I missing any others?
I like to look at WP Minute as an Omni-Channel publication. And it is audio, it is video, it is the blog, it is the newsletter, it is social, and it is community. But I dabble in a lot of WordPress podcasts, the Gravity Forms podcast. I have a back catalog of successful and failed podcasts that we could talk about. But it's been quite the journey to leading up to this point.
Could you give us a quick overview? How did you get to this point? How did you get to being a WordPress publisher?
I'll try to give you the fastest way of the last 25 years so we don't bore the listeners. But it started many years ago. I was a salesperson at Circuit City. That's how far back we're going to go, boys, because the fact that got me into technology was one day we were selling boxes of Linux on the shelves and, getting into open source and learning how to build an alternative to Windows was very interesting to me. Family had a car dealership, Chevrolet and Cadillac dealership. I was the only person there that knew computers, as the people say. And just sort of had this love for like technology growing up. Worked at an ISP. We acquired a web development. We had acquired another ISP, had a web development arm. They were using Drupal 4 at the time, and the designer, who I'm still friends with today, was like, Matt, we got to get off this Drupal thing. I heard there's this WordPress thing. How can we transition to using this WordPress thing? So that was my early experience into getting WordPress. Once I left that ISP with some knowledge and understanding on agency life, we were selling clients on websites. Again, this goes back very, very, 2 decades plus. When I got out of the ISP, my father was getting out of the car dealership industry. And we happened upon starting a WordPress agency, where some of my early employees at the time were John DeRosa, who now works at Bluehost, Jeff Galinsky, who works at Automatic. And, I had quickly learned about the WordPress community when I was trying to start my agency as a non-technical founder and as somebody who never kind of like ran an agency except for the experience I had at the ISP, which was kind of short-lived. Found a WordPress meetup in Providence, Rhode Island. There were some big hitters there as well. Jake Goldman from 10up, Jesse Friedman, also at Automatic, Jay Tripp, who's at Awesomotive now. It was a pretty quick learning experience into the world of WordPress. But the issue was, as I watched my fellow friend and colleague Jake Goldman grow 10up quite quickly as an engineer and as somebody who knew the WordPress community, I asked myself, how do I do that? How can I do the same thing? And without being Jake and this super dev. So I was just, at the time, I was like, I'll just start a blog and interview people. I was a big fan of Mixergy, Andrew Warner's podcast. I turned that into a podcast called Matt Report, where I interviewed guests from around the WordPress community and used it as a way to just meet people, right? How do I find other developers? How do I talk to other agencies and learn how to do this stuff? And that built a portfolio of friends, colleagues, and other freelancers to work with. Agencies that weren't taking on the smaller projects, trusted me because I've interviewed them. They've seen my content, and it became a real driving revenue driver for the agency. And after a few years of doing that, it turned into a sales tool for the agency. And it was a way to show clients that, we have this deep understanding of WordPress. Literally, like, if you want to see what it's like to work with me, like, listen to these episodes that I'm publishing, because this is me, raw. This is me talking about building websites. If you like this, then you'll like working with me. It was an advantage, right? As we had a, I don't want to say weak portfolio, but we had a very young, immature portfolio compared to the competition. So it became a sales tool. And then it just, like, the passion for WordPress and continuing to teach and help other people, hopefully entertain, educate, inspire a little bit of folks along the way. And Matt Report ran for a decade plus, and then transitioned into WP Minute when I was like, hey, you should take this a little bit more serious and build like an asset out of this thing and like make it a real business. Like, can I turn WordPress media into something sustainable? And that's the crazy idea about 4.5 years ago that got me down the WP Minute path, and what's led me here to this fine conversation with you guys.
So you now have an omni-channel empire
I do,
of podcasts and videos and newsletters. How does it all fit together? Is there one of these that dominates? I know you have a Slack channel that is members only and is really quite busy, quite popular.
Slack, yeah. The community took to the streets when I had Discord. They weren't happy when I was on Discord, but I will still say Discord has a great free plan, of course, and you can do a lot more with like the technical side of it. But a lot of folks on the WordPress side very used to and accustomed to Slack. Omni-channel. Listen, the nugget I'll throw out there that maybe we can talk about. I think in this day and age, I've never created content that was SEO driven, for better or worse, right? Like, I have never become beholden to that drug of ranking SEO and making sure that everything is optimized, and I have to constantly watch my rankings. And does this blog post have enough links? And do I have to go back and nurture this content? It is totally against any kind of like true digital publication strategy. But when I see like what is happening with AI and search shifting, I feel a little bit okay that a lot of my traffic has always been, I guess I don't have a reference for it, but like an outbound and inbound game. Like, it's never been about SEO for me. Like, I don't have anything that ranks for WordPress entrepreneur or blue collar digital worker that is driving revenue to this business. It's about creating the content that we like, pushing out and promoting it, cultivating a community around that, and hopefully that community helps bubble up this content to other folks. In other words, I'm not looking at Google search. I'm not looking at pay per clicks. I'm not doing Facebook ads. So I feel like it's a slower grind, but it's also not something that I'm addicted to, I guess you could say.
Is anyone searching for blue collar digital workers?
Absolutely not, Dan.
But it's what's stuck in my mind a long time ago. And say more about that. Does that define your community earlier on, or still, or is that a
yeah? I mean, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about this topic on the way to my office today, in anticipation for this conversation. But this is just something that it's just part of me, right? If you go back to the early chapters of my career and working at the family dealership, the car dealership, it was General Motors, and we were megacorp before they went bankrupt, before the financial crisis, and we were just a family-owned and operated car dealership, 50 miles south of Boston. But if you went 50 miles north to Boston, you had mega dealerships, right? Herb Chambers, he's a billionaire. I don't even know how many dealerships he has, 100 plus. I don't even know. And you had that typical frame of reference of like what it's like to buy a car. Oh, God, right? They're going to take my keys. They're not going to give me my license back. I have to deal, like I have to go to war with these people. And when we got those types of clients in to purchase cars, it's like, no, man, we're family owned and operated for 50 years, right? There were people that worked at our dealership that worked nowhere else for their entire lives. They started when they were 18 and they retired, working at our dealership. We were the essence of small business and family owned dealership. So I was always sort of, taught to be like, I'm always, my back's always up against the wall, right? It's these big dealerships competing with us. It's General Motors telling you have to do this thing. And the only way that we could stand out was to like be good community citizens, do things in the community, give back, treat our employees well, treat our customers well. I know it's a foreign concept to a lot of people, but that's how it worked. And I try to instill the same thing with the WP Minute and of course, like the Matt Report. Where are the things that I can help others that were like me, who didn't understand the community, who didn't understand, the topography of this crazy, universe that we live in? And can I help others understand that? Like not trying to sell a course, not trying to get you into a membership specifically, except if you want to support me. But it's about like, I understand what it's like to just put a good business together, work hard for the client, and just try to profit so you can live to see another day, right? And that's what that blue collar worker is for me, because I interviewed people who were just like, yes, every project should be $100,000 and you should have this deliverable and your contract should look like this and your proposals like that. And you should time box your developers and, designers and do all this stuff. Hey, great. But when you're in the trenches of doing this stuff, it doesn't always pan out that way. You try your best. And you're not going to sell a $100,000 client every single time. If a client has $5,000, can you walk away with 30% profitability so you can survive the winter time? Because that's what it's like as a small agency owner. So that's sort of like that blue collar essence is how can I show others this information and share it so that they're educated and they can go off and do their own things.
Do you feel, sorry, Steve, do you feel vindicated, like that's coming back, that's going to have its moment? I'm thinking of, we recently spoke with Brian Morrissey's in consulting and dealing with publishers in the digital space where very traditional things, like you've got a newsletter and you talk directly to your audience. Andy, too, we spoke with a few weeks ago. Very, very close relationship. Sounds a lot like what you're talking about. When you have that audience, they're not going to get the same thing from AI or from, they're not going to find it as a result of a search. They've got to get in a community.
Yeah. I mean, with the temperature in the room for WordPress these days, for me anyway, it's about being level-headed. Are we happy with what's happening? No. Is there anything better? Like, is there an absolute alternative to WordPress that allow you to run the same business? No. So like, we're stuck in this middle point, at least my opinion. And it's, how do we continue forward, doing what we're doing while, questioning what's happening and is this the right move? But also supporting WordPress to say, well, this thing is fundamental to our business, and many businesses. So how can we at least stay positive to want to push this thing forward while we figure out what's happening at the top? And when it boils down to the agency who's actually servicing this stuff, absolutely. I've been saying for years that in the face of bigger business, it's that human side that's going to win out. Why I love podcasts like this, because it's the human emotion, it's the experiences, and I don't see that getting replaced anytime soon. It's about being like a champion in, I don't really, not labeling myself a champion, but the ideological way of saying like, it's about being a champion in this space. When I ran an agency,
maybe a fanboy or
when I ran my agency, one of the outside of the box things that we did is we printed in this little corner of Massachusetts, Southeast Massachusetts, South Coast Massachusetts. There's a small but budding travel industry, whaling museum, a lot of historical stuff. And we ran a printed publication travel guide, like real estate, like the old real estate books. I don't know if they even still exist, but the little printed real estate magazines. And it was that size. And we would print out, I don't even remember, 20,000, 30,000. I don't remember what the number was. But we did that for like 3 or 4 years as a way to champion the area and say, like, we really like this area. We want to support this area. And here's all the good things happening on like local business and local tourism. And, we would sell advertising to support it and sustain it. It's the same model that I use for the WP Minute. It's like, please support us so we can actually continue to do this. And those that found it valuable always showed up to reestablish an ad spot. And it was a great centerpiece for folks that coming into the area to find all the good stuff. Now, again, this is like 15 years ago, but that's what we did. And I feel like, I'm kind of doing the same thing again.
Yeah, your dad's still running the agency side, right? That's still going, still a family business.
Yep, still a family business. I did it personally for a decade and then started having kids. And I was just like, yes, agency life and having kids is quite difficult. And I had to get a day job.
Can you give us a breakdown of how the WP Minute business works? You have sponsors, you have people that pay you each year to be part of your private Slack. And how does the revenue come in through WP Minute? What keeps the business going?
Yeah, so definitely sponsors is the biggest portion of the revenue. There's just two plans, a pillar sponsorship and a foundation plus sponsorship. And those pillar sponsorships are the ones that really help drive the business, helps pay my editors, helps pay Eric Karkovac, who writes for me and who is now doing some podcasts. He has now taken over the WP Minute short form podcast to talk about freelance stuff. So it certainly helps with that. So it's this collection of sponsorship. I'll also do sponsored YouTube videos as well as another sort of like channel. If you're not interested in sponsoring, you can get sponsored YouTube content as well. And then simple donations. Hey, if you like the work that we're doing, $5, buy us a coffee. And if you want to pledge $79, that's the membership. That's sort of like the VIP level of sponsorship. It's just a way to say like, hey, we really like the work you're doing. Either way, a donation gets you access to our Slack group, which is highly focused on talking about WordPress news. Post Status and other groups have a different sort of lens that people should be joining those memberships for, whether it's like support for the business or, networking, mental health stuff. Like there's a bunch of like little, niche categories in those types of Slack groups. Ours is like specifically, hey, you're here to chat about the news. Like everyone in this Slack group knows where news is coming in. We want to talk about it. We want to chat about it. And that's like the promise. So that's the sort of multifaceted revenue channel. Classified section, that's actually pretty popular as well. That goes into the newsletter. Those are little do-it-yourself or DIY ad spots that customers can come and buy. So it's just a collection of revenue streams. The YouTube ads for the YouTube channel helps. It's not massive, but it certainly adds to the pie. And I'm starting to expand with another property called CMS Minute. So can I take that same model and bring that over to the wider world of CMS? And the first season of that podcast is sponsored by Ghost. So they looked at it and said, yeah, it's the same approach I had. I said, hey, I'm going to make some podcasts. Do you want to sponsor it for this kind of content? It's great for your community. It's great for the as a whole. And, John O'Nolan said yes. So really proud to see that come to life.
That's just what I was thinking. You need another podcast.
Yeah.
How do you make it all work? How do you organize you've got a full-time job with Gravity Forms?
Yep.
And you've got a Gravity Forms podcast as part of that full-time job.
Yep.
Then you have the WP Minute, organizing newsletters, videos, podcasts, the Slack channel, organizing staff members who are also churning out content. Now you're adding another podcast, another website, another channel.
Yeah.
How does it all fit together? How do you make it all work?
Sure. One, you have to be a little bit crazy, right? So there's that check. Two, like you have to love this. You have to really love like this kind of like WordPress content. When I started the WP Minute, it was an effort to like do what I was calling community journalism at the time, which was like, hey, you have important news topics. Let's all come together. You share your news topics, and we'll sort of curate this. What was supposed to be just a newsletter. It was supposed to be just a newsletter. That's all it was supposed to be. and sort of growing this effort to get folks to join in on the fun. A lot of people with the stuff that's happening now, stuff that's happened prior. Dan, I'm sure you've gotten DMs before, like, hey, you should be writing about this. Hey, you should be covering that. Why aren't you covering, this particular topic or this particular community? And, this is all happening behind the scenes, sometimes in public. And it's just like, because there's no money here. Okay. Like how much time and effort do you think I can put into this? And what do you think? I have like this, this massive megacorp behind me sponsoring this stuff. The point is when I started the WP Minute, it was actually a lot of work trying to like curate all that news and do it and have commentary around it. And that sort of died out a little bit because that was a lot of work. Then I transitioned into writing a weekly monologue for the 5-minute podcast. And again, like focusing on the industry news was difficult, right? Dan knows this. Ray knows this. Sarah Gooding knows this. It's very difficult to, come up with this topic every single week if there's no massive drama happening. I mean, plenty of money in WordPress news business in the last few months, but when nothing's happening, it's just like, what are we doing? Like, what are we talking about? And that was a lot of work. So I then transitioned that down. Even that 5-minute podcast was very difficult mentally to produce every week, along with the interview stuff. So then now I've just transitioned. If you picture stair steps, I'm going down right now. I'm trying to lessen that workload. And now what I'm doing is just focused on the interviews, what I do best, bringing people in, talking about those topics. And Eric is stepping up and writing more and doing the 5-minute podcast now. I'd love to get into a position, I'm sure Eric would as well, where if I can get more sponsorship, there's more money to invest in work from Eric and maybe others to, support this content. So I'm finally, 4.5, 5 years into this WP Minute thing, trying to extract myself from the weekly investment of time and, put others in place, which was the goal all along. It just took 5 years to get there and we're not even fully there yet. So the short of it is, creating the content is easy, air quotes, easy for me. 45 minutes for an interview, do a bunch of those in a week. I have a month worth of content and do YouTube content when I'm motivated to do it. And that's how it goes. CMS Minute, same thing. Bucket a bunch of people to interview for a season 1. That's the promise to John. That's the promise to CMS Minute. Release that season, see how it goes. Invest if things look positive, and create another season and rinse repeat.
What I'm hearing is that you're almost in your constant motion. You're like the shark of the WordPress world. There are people who do great work in WordPress. I'm thinking like Nathan Wrigley with his podcasts, which he does a bunch of them, but every Monday, every single week, he has 4 people on. They have their routine every single week. And maybe say Bob WP over with his WooCommerce stuff has really quite a regimented schedule and has been, with small iterations, been doing that for quite some time. Whereas from you describing your journey from Circuit City to where you are now, what seems to be the constant is you're always iterating, and what you're doing this month is almost guaranteed to be different from last month.
Yeah. I recently acquired Master WP, and I've just put that out into the universe, right? Like I want that to be much more of like training and education, maybe somehow support folks with WordPress careers. But that is like what I'll do is I'll start something small, I'll launch it. As long as it's launched, I haven't forgotten about it. And I will slowly, iterate. And I have ideas for it. And I'm just like trying to take things slow. Really, the jump from CMS or WP Minute to CMS Minute is at least a small laboratory test to say, like, look, I can make another property. I can monetize that. Can I do that again on another property? I have another newsletter, thepodcastsetup.com, which is about sharing people who have podcast setups that want to share what they're doing with their podcast setup It's great free promotion. They can just fill it out and I post it. There's a little questionnaire that they fill out powered by Gravity Forms, and I, promote it to the newsletter. But I also cover other important things happening in the podcast space. Not as frequent for sure on that newsletter, but I'm trying to get all of this stuff in motion. Just takes some time.
Man, the show notes for this episode are going to be insane. We need to also add masterwp.com, right?
Yeah,
which is
haven't even talked about Pulse WP.
So you got a podcasting newsletter as well, and then you have this new branch of your Omni-Channel empire, which is CMS Minute, branching out to cover perhaps Ghost and Drupal. You've been, what's the word for it? Not cynical. That's not the right word. Realistic, perhaps, about some of the problems in the WordPress space and how they might affect WordPress going forward. This is your kind of attempt to branch out to a future where WordPress might not be quite as strong in a few years' time?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just like, as I, have witnessed everything, happening, I think it's important where, like, I know that there's a ceiling, right, in WordPress news content, or even like WordPress freelancer content. Like we're covering, me and Eric and I are covering stuff where we want to talk about and we want to publish things that are experiences, right? We're not trying to do listicles, tutorials. Every now and again, we might post something that's like really interesting to us or maybe important for what's happening in the world of WordPress. The idea is that we're publishing this stuff with some real human experience in it. Like if Eric's giving you advice, it's because he lived it in the freelance world. If I'm giving you business advice, it's because I lived it in my business world. And there's a ceiling on that kind of content, in my opinion. And 10,000 English-speaking people across the globe, that's my number. That's my back of the napkin math for, who's interested in this kind of content in WordPress. So it's like looking at that going, okay, I'm only going to make X amount of revenue on WP Minute, potentially. So CMS Minute is all the CMSs, including a little bit of WordPress. And again, it's just like a testament to seeing if I can take that blueprint and put it on here. But certainly it spawned because I started looking at what was happening back in October or September, August, October, forget when the month was. And I was like, I gotta make sure I have some kind of insurance policy here, right? Something else that's going to take me out of this WordPress thing if it all goes, to hell in a handbasket. So that's when the idea started. Was literally right after that stuff.
I guess when you include Ghost, suddenly then you open up Substack, Beehive. If you can put those under the CMS phrase, then perhaps that's really quite an enormous space it opens up to you. If you start talking about newsletter platforms too.
Yeah, newsletter platforms, Wix, Squarespace. I'm not going for like the big commercial brands first. I'm going for the smaller folks. Craft CMS, Statamic, Ghost. There's another one I interviewed. I can't remember the name of his app right now. But I'm trying to go for, again, like the folks who are building content management systems that are much smaller than WordPress, but are also growing because of what's happening, to WordPress. And I'm trying to make season 1 not all about like, hey, you see what's happening with WordPress, why should people switch over to your CMS? But I'm pushing into them a little bit and saying like, well, why aren't you GPL? What don't you like about that open source model? Why do you charge $200 for a license? Like, I understand why they do it, but I want them, to articulate that. So, trying to like really look at these alternatives, and usher people in. Like if you want an alternative to WordPress, because let's be honest, WordPress isn't for everyone or for every project. Look, maybe Craft CMS or Statamic is a solution, right? So that's what I'm hoping to do in that season 1.
So you're very much leaning into a future where other platforms may be nibbling around the edge of WordPress's market share.
Sure.
And you've also been posting quite a lot about AI as well.
Yes.
That's the Pulse WP that Dan mentioned?
Yeah. AI, or as I like to call it, the page builder for any software.
Well, it's a little deeper than page building. It looks like you kind of leveled up your skills to a new level of development type project that ended in this new site, pulse.cc, pulsewp.cc.
You're not a non-developer anymore, Matt. You have AI to help you out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's honestly, it's the same kind of, energy, that same kind of inspiration that, when I learned about Drupal, CCK, and views many years ago, I was like, wow, this stuff is awesome. I can do this. I can make a PHP query and database query without writing code. Then I discovered WordPress. You do that same kind of thing with ACF. When I found Gravity Forms, I was like, oh my God, I can solve customer problems with just this plugin. That was really powerful. And now kind of doing like the same thing, using all these AI tools that are available to us and building these little mini apps, these little utility apps. And PulseWP is just a WordPress RSS news aggregator, but it was just something that like helped serve what I do every single day, which is like try to keep up with the news. So I wanted something like that, something that summarized the articles for me, something that made little social share snippets that I could use in social media as I share it out, just cut down, like we talked about before, how do I manage all this stuff? Give me like 10% more efficiency every day on keeping up with this stuff. And that's what Pulse is. And I got some, ideas for it, but I can only go as far as the AI agent will let me because it's a lot of ramming my head into the wall.
Can you talk us through that? So you started off with the idea.
Yeah.
We are at the end of February 2025 now.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with the tools as they are now. 2 months later, they may be entirely better and different. But right now, what platform did you choose to use? What was the process like to start with the idea and then end up with a whole new website, basically an RSS aggregator?
Yeah.
What was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you have your traditional publishers watching with this, just like Matt Mullenweg says, to learn AI deeply, as he just mentioned again, WordCamp Asia, I think the tools that are out there can really help you build interactive maps, data summaries, summaries of local government meetings, which is like another thing I want to do on the side. But I used a platform called Replit, REPLIT, for this. And for PulseWP, and like you just mentioned, I just got an email yesterday. They're already like Claude 3.7 came out. It's supposed to be the best. Like every month somebody leapfrogs, or every week, I should say, an AI platform leapfrogs another one and says it's the best. But they're already mentioning that they're building a whole new, better AI coding agent inside of Replit. But I like to think of Replit, for those that know the reference, I like to think of Replit as like the Elementor for AI. You may not like that statement, but it means that it has everything inside of it. I've used other platforms, like just vanilla ChatGPT, and trying to like extract code and putting it into environments. That was a mess. Another great one is Bolt, bolt.new. But you're still like playing around with all the infrastructure and getting it all working together. Replit just has everything in-house. It has the coding agent, the hosting, user management, which is a big thing, debugging, connecting up with GitHub, all this stuff. So I used that because everything was there and it was just one central system. And I came up with the idea and just started prompting away to building out this Pulse app, and it's hosted at Replit. And I started to work and iterate on it and build it up, to where I needed it to be. But you really start to become a developer when you're writing, like, you're asking it to run tests for you. You're asking it to build like administrative features that are just for analyzing what's happening. So for example, I have the idea, say, hey, build me an app that takes in RSS feeds and then displays a summary on the homepage. That's it, right? Start with that. And it builds you it. And that's all it is. And then you go and you go to add an RSS feed and it gives you one field. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. I don't want one field. I want like 10 fields. Maybe I want to paste in like 10 feeds at a time. I want to make this process faster. And then I started building that feature out. And then what would happen? I put a bunch of RSS feeds in and then nothing would happen. Where's all my RSS? Like, where's all the content? And then the back of my head is like, oh, this thing is processing it. It's not telling me it has to process it. It's not saying, hey, it's going to take a little while to process 100 articles that you just put in, right? So I started to build features that would show me what's happening in the server. Like if I'm processing RSS feeds, show me a countdown, like how many feeds are you processing? How many are left? Tell me where the system's at. And then I would build that feature. So then I could log in and see, okay, is there a problem processing RSS feeds? Is the AI system still like waiting for OpenAI to give it a summary response? And you start becoming like that user experience person, QA person, UX person. You start to learn all this stuff. It takes time if you're a non-techie like me, but you eventually get there at the cost of 30,000 tokens inside of your AI slot machine that you're pulling down every few minutes.
So you found that to be a real learning curve.
Yeah, I mean that's the learning curve. Is it's only going to give you what you ask for, and if you don't know database structure and like what you should be asking for, you could certainly spiral, out of control. Luckily, I have some experience and I kind of understand the stack, having been doing it for.
You probably registered the AIminute.com already.
I did.
I knew it.
Was that a WordPress project, or Pulse? WP Pulse is totally separate.
It's totally separate. Yeah, it's a React app. It's React base with it's Replic's database backend, which is Postgres. Yeah, and it's just all custom made.
I have little Replit experience, but it was pretty fascinating. You go in there and it'll build something. It'll set up a server. It will do WordPress, and it will then try to test and validate its own work.
Yeah. The weird thing is again, so I'll make this quick. If anyone's going to go and try Replit, to see, check it out yourself. One of the, if you start building something more complex, like Pulse WP is at this point, what you have to do is finish talking to it. Because here's what I found. You'd ask it for a feature. It runs through, it builds the feature. And then if you don't like if you don't confirm the feature is done, it kind of like remembers that you were asking about that feature. So what'll happen is, the next day, an hour later, you could be asking for another feature, and suddenly it will rewrite the feature from before. Because like in its memory, you've never said, hey, that was great. Good job, AI. Like you've completed the task. So like I've found myself having to have like these complete smaller conversations so that I take it in smaller chunks at a time. Much like if you were talking to a developer and you slammed like this 50-page spec sheet on them for building an app, they're going to look at it and go, oh my God, I need 2 weeks to look at this. Having those smaller, tighter conversations are very important, at least with Replit from my experience.
So part of your realism about WordPress is also inspired by AI as well, that if you want to make an RSS reader, you can go to Replit and for $15 a month, start creating your own RSS reader. At some point, that's got to happen inside of WordPress too, right? Log into your WordPress dashboard, type, I would like an RSS reader plugin, and there'd be an iterative process to get that plugin generated for you automatically. And that's what people are going to expect pretty soon, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the scenarios that I'm predicting. There was a lot of criticism around Matt Mullenweg's WordCamp Asia talk. I did a reactionary video to it, intentionally clickbaity, but I gave a lot of my opinions, on it. I was called an apologist, of course. But I think that there is something, there is definitely something there. And you can only, the question that prompted all this was Courtney Robertson asked, hey, what's the 5-year plan? And sort of looked like Matt and Matthias both kind of shut down when they heard you must predict 5 years, especially through the lens of AI. So I would love a world where WordPress and AI get parallel, where you can go to a chat bot and code WordPress blocks or code WordPress. One of the big things that I've found throughout this experience is I now appreciate WordPress a lot more by being that monolithic app that I can just launch right? Because if you start to experiment and you don't know what you're doing like me, it takes a lot of time. Like it's like 40 hours to build Pulse WP, right? Where I'm sure a skilled developer would be like, I can do that in 5 hours, right? I can do that in a fraction of the time. So I have a better appreciation for WordPress to say, well, number one, this is done for me. Like user login and management, these systems are not, if you don't ask for it, it doesn't build it, right? I'm sure they'll get better, right? For sure. But like WordPress has all that stuff built in, right? So Pulse WP could have been a WordPress site. I mean, I didn't want it to be because I wanted to try all this stuff. But the point is like WordPress is done for you. The other thing, which is hard to compete with, is who's taking care of Pulse WP besides me? Whereas WordPress is, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of people who take care of this open source project with air quotes. That's a huge bonus, right? Yeah, yes, the argument is AI will have agents that just run in the background, shoot you an email and say, hey, Matt, notice that Pulse WP has a security flaw. Would you like me to patch it? I will say yes, right? But, that's a world that's still, I don't know how many years away, 1, 2, 3, 5. I don't know how far off that is. But right now, like this human-generated software is very important. And I don't know what the world's going to look like when it's just AI agents constantly thinking about the software that you built. I don't know what that leads to. Replit kind of does that now. It'll serve up features for you. Like if I say, hey, I'm done with that feature, great job, it'll say, hey, we can build these features too. That's kind of cool, right? But I don't know where that all leads, for the future of software development, like what software looks like. Is this good or bad? I have no idea.
I guess what's future-proof is probably your attitude, right? Your focus on personal connection. You take the thread from Circuit City through to the car dealership, to the agency and the agency podcast, to your WP Minute work now. It's the focus on making a human connection. That what actually powers the connection, the technology under the hood may be generated with WordPress or Drupal 4 or AI or whatever might be coming in the future. But what's layered on top of that is something that may stand you and us in good shape in the future, which is the focus on providing some human value for people.
Yeah. I mean, it's something I've been urging WordPress companies and product companies and agencies, right? Is again, I always go back, like start a podcast, start a YouTube channel. Like, where's that human side of you? Like, I recently switched from MailChimp to ConvertKit simply on the ideals of, well, I know Nathan Barry. I know he's one guy. I'm, software, hit or miss on a few features. Some things don't match up, good and bad, both sides. But I was just like, how can I start voting with my software for small people that I know run this company, right? I don't know anyone at Intuit, and no one at Intuit cares about me, right? So I'm trying to make these conscious decisions to work with software from people that I know. And WordPress has a massive advantage for that. A lot of WordPress plugin companies, there's a single human behind it, or a dozen humans behind it. And I want everyone in the WordPress space to extract that human side of your brand and get it out there. It never makes dollars and cents in terms of like the ROI on marketing, but it does have a broader brand sentiment and branding opportunity, in my opinion.
So, final question from us, which kind of maybe continues directly on from your talk about people putting their human face forward as part of their brand. Is there a publisher, it could be part of a company or it could be an individual publisher, who you've seen lately that does great work? Someone who you get their newsletter, you see their YouTube video drop. Is there someone out there whose work you really admire at the moment?
Well, for sure, Ray, whom you've had on before at the repository. She does fantastic work in the WordPress space. I'll give another hat tip to ConvertKit and for Nathan's investment into and to creators, he's actually starting up, I don't know what the website is off the top of my head, but he has a local podcast studio, I want to say in Ohio, at an office that he has in Ohio. I think that's where it's located. But that's I love seeing that. That's like, we serve creators and we're building a podcast studio for our customers to show up and like create content. I mean, that's amazing. And then on the YouTube side, so these guys at Neil Patel, that's who I'm thinking of.
Oh, yeah.
And I will say that I have not been a fan of Neil Patel for many years because of, I felt like his SEO stuff was always kind of gray hat. But I'm just looking for it on my feed. And of course, I'm not seeing it. But Neil Patel, here it is, Marketing School. So these guys actually did a 180. And this will be my last sort of sentiment on this. Marketing School, if you search for that on YouTube, you'll find it. It's Neil Patel. When they launched, he did what I've always kind of disliked from him. So I don't know when they launched this podcast, about a year ago. And it was just riddled with ads, right? Like 5 minutes. It was a 20-minute show. Had to have 10 minutes of ads in it. And I was like, I cannot stand what these guys are doing. They're typical marketers, just ruining everything, myself included as a marketer. I understand what we all do, but slowly has evolved to having a much more pure conversation, less ads, and the topics are pretty on point for small agencies and folks in the AI space. That was a long ramble. I'm sorry.
Cool. So if people want to get more Matt, they want access to your podcast, to your news, what's the best way to do it? Can they subscribe?
You can find me at my
Can they join?
Yeah, they can find me at my day job at gravityforms.com. That's where you'll find all the stuff I do day to day. If you are interested in WordPress news and you want to just find out what's happening there, the best way to do that is go to the wpminute.com/subscribe. And then I have one site that has everything I do at craftedbymatt.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate having you. I'm off to write some epic show notes after this.
This is what AI is for.
That's a good point.
That's true.
I'll let you know if AI can summarize all the links we had in this chat.